Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Power, control, coercion, and revenge. At its very core, this case is about domestic violence. The defendant, Kevin Eastman, he didn't want to lose Heather Frank. He didn't want to lose a hold of her. He didn't want her to slip through. And because he felt like that was happening, two people lost their lives. These hands brought danger, destruction, and death. These hands killed Scott Sessions and Heather Frank, wrapped their bodies in plastic, set one on fire, and was preparing to burn the other. These hands are the hands of a murderer. These are the hands of the defendant, Kevin Eastman. These hands bring us to this courtroom, but these hands left a trail of evidence. Over the next few weeks, you're going to hear evidence and you're going to see evidence presented. And this will span several different law enforcement agencies, including two different counties, Larimer County and Weld County. But there are two witnesses, ladies and gentlemen, that you will not hear from. Two people whose deceased bodies will have to speak for themselves. Two murders. Scott Sessions was murdered on the night of February 8th. Heather Frank was murdered on February 15th of 2020. All the credible evidence in this case, all of it, will lead you to one person. It's a person you've already met, and that is the defendant, Kevin Eastman. This crime begins with Heather Frank. Heather Frank was 48 years old. She was a server who worked in Loveland, at Doug's Day Diner. You're going to hear that she was a daughter, and she was also a mother of 3 young men. You're going to hear that she was very friendly. She lived in Greeley on 35th. And you're also going to hear that she loved Jeff. But, unfortunately, what you're going to hear is that Heather Frank was in an on-again, off-again domestic violence relationship with the defendant, Kevin Eastman. And that had occurred over a period of 5 years. And like domestic violence relationships, that cycle, you're going to hear that there were breakups and there were makeups. But the defendant, he was always around. He was never very far away. And you're going to hear that part of this cycle is also substance abuse. You're going to hear that both Heather Frank and Kevin Eastman were drinkers, heavy drinkers at times, and that fuels this domestic violence relationship. You're going to hear from family members, co-workers, people who made observations of injuries that were with explanations that were implausible or minimized. They will tell you about what they saw and the kind of domestic violence relationship that she had with the defendant. And you're going to hear about threats over jealousy. And like domestic violence relationships, that cycle continued until it led to Heather Frank's death and to Scott Sessions' death, who had no idea that he would become involved in this dangerous situation. You're going to hear that in December of 2019, Heather Frank and the defendant had another breakup. And, you know, sometimes those ties that bind, they can't be broken. But in this particular instance, he leaves the state, he ends up going to Parachute, Colorado. So now he's far enough away, and maybe now she's going to be okay and safe. And that's when she meets Scott Sessions. And you'll hear that Scott Sessions, he is a handsome, charismatic, 53-year-old who is a jazz musician. And he plays trumpet. He's a son, a father, or not a father, he's a son and a brother. And he, as well, has bandmates with the Movers and Shakers. It's a jazz band. You're going to hear that Heather Frank, she liked him. She was a fan. But remember what I said, the defendant, never far away. And on February 8th of 2020, the defendant shows up at her apartment, uninvited and unexpected. You're going to hear right about that same time, her Facebook account sends a message to Scott Sessions, her new love interest. An invitation to come over to her place. Scott accepts. What you're going to hear is that the evidence is going to suggest that Scott was, when he entered that apartment, was immediately killed right inside the entryway of that apartment. By the only person who had any reason to dislike him, and that would be this man here. And you're going to hear that that blood evidence is going to show you that. But in this particular case, the blood evidence isn't the only evidence that's going to show you where Scott Sessions was murdered. Because you are going to hear digital cell phone analysis. And that cellular phone analysis is going to tell you that the defendant's phone, Heather Frank's phone, and Scott Sessions' phone, all three of them were in the same place, Heather Frank's apartment, all night long. That same cellular phone analysis is also going to be corroborated by Stan Sessions, who will tell you that he was on the phone with his son in that evening-ish hour of February the 8th of 2020 when he had the last conversation that he would have with his son. And you're going to hear about that and about the fact that his son tells him he's honest. That digital cell phone evidence is also going to tell you that on February 9th, very early in the morning, the defendant's phone and Heather Frank's phone traveled up to Ted's place. And they traveled together up to Ted's place. And then you're going to hear that they go even further, and you're going to hear that there is video surveillance documenting the defendant's car, the Subaru Crosstrek, going up the Cedar Canyon, past the Mishawaka, and proceeding further into the canyon. And what you're going to see is the timing here, because you'll see the vehicle go up, and then you'll see it come back down. And you're going to hear how that timing relates to the discovery of Scott Sessions' body, wrapped in plastic, on fire, in Henry Park. And his body was still smoldering in the early morning hours of February 10th of 2020, when a snowplow driver, just doing his job, discovers his body. You're going to hear that after his body is discovered, that Heather Frank goes back to work. There are several different activities that she does, and you're going to hear witnesses talk about what that looks like. And you're also going to hear from an expert in domestic violence, victim dynamics, and she's going to tell you about how that cycle of violence affects the way victims act, especially a victim of a really dangerous domestic violence relationship like Heather Frank had with the defendant. You're going to hear that there were other investigative techniques that were used during this period of time by investigators at Laramie County Sheriff's Department. They're going to talk to you about things like a pole cam that was placed in her cul-de-sac and a GPS tracker that is placed on the defendant's Subaru cross truck. And all of that stuff is done in light of the information and investigation that they have connecting Scott Sessions, Heather Frank, and the defendant. You're also going to see the last known video of Heather Frank alive, the last time she's seen alive. And you're going to see her get into the Subaru cross truck with the defendant on February 15th of 2020. You're also going to see and hear from Deputy Donnie Robbins. And Donnie Robbins is going to tell you that he has concerns when, on this February 15th date, when he realizes that Heather Frank's phone and the defendant's phone are left at her apartment. But they clearly have left in this cross truck. So he does good old-fashioned eyes-on surveillance. He follows the defendant, and the defendant goes to an address on Weld County Road 45, this property. And you're going to hear that on the evening of February 15th, 2020, that GPS tracker is going to show when he gets there, when he leaves again, when he goes back, when he leaves again, and when he comes back. That timeline is going to become very important. Pay close attention because it's going to tell you a lot. You're also going to hear from Troy Bennell. And this property was Troy Bennell's property. He ran a business, Troy Bennell Transportation, and he's going to tell you that on February 15th, the defendant comes to his house. He knows the defendant. They have a history together. And Troy Bennell actually had offered him a job. He had offered him a job with room and board and salary because the defendant was a diesel mechanic, and he needed a diesel mechanic to fix his trucks. And you're going to hear that on February 15th, the defendant shows up, and he takes items out of the back of his Subaru cross truck. He dumps them off in a garage that's attached to the house. And you're going to see this pile of clothing and tools and a lunch pail. important to note that while Troy Bonnell sees the defendant and him unpacking these things, what he doesn't see is he doesn't see his other friend. And you're going to hear that that becomes very concerning to Donnie Robbins over the course of the next few days for him. But primarily, Troy Bonnell sees him, he speaks with him, you're going to hear he speaks with him late at night, and there's another woman with him when he speaks with the defendant, and her name is Jennifer Edmonds. Jennifer Edmonds worked for Troy Bonnell doing invoicing, and she also had a different kind of relationship with him as well, and you'll hear about that. You'll hear about the fact that on February 15th, when she arrives at Troy Bonnell's house late at night, she brings with her energy drinks. She has one for herself. Troy Bonnell and the defendant. It's the first time she's ever met the defendant. You'll hear they have a very short conversation amongst the three of them. And then Jennifer Edmonds and Troy Bonnell go to the bedroom and they do work and other activities not related to work. And that they're there all night long. But Jennifer Edmonds never sees that. On February 16th in the morning, Donnie Robbins goes back to the property on WCR 45. And you're going to hear that when he goes back there, he's doing surveillance. And what does he see? He sees the defendant at the burn pit burning stuff. And he becomes very, very concerned. Because remember, they're investigating the Scott Hutchins murder. He also becomes concerned because he doesn't see Heather Frank either. You're going to hear that the defendant then gets into a Subaru Crosstrek and he leaves the property. And when he leaves that property, he has a gas can with him. So Deputy Robbins follows him. And Deputy Robbins is doing multitasking because he's not only following the defendant, but he's on the phone trying to get a search warrant for that County Road 45 property, Troy Bonnell's. He has concerns about that possibly evidence is being destroyed. And so what he does is follows him to the gas station. And at that point in time, while the defendant is filling up a gas can with diesel, he arrested him. And the defendant is taken and transported to the Laramie County Sheriff's Department at that time. Meanwhile, they're getting the warrant for the property on WCR 45. So when Laramie County Sheriff's Department arrived there to assess Laramie County with the execution of the search warrant, very big property, they start at that burn pit, they document the evidence there, but then you're going to hear that they move on to the garage. And in the garage, they go to that pile of stuff that we talked about, and they find clothing, the defendant's clothing. And they send clothing and some other items off to Colorado Bureau of Investigations. And at that point in time, Colorado Bureau of Investigations, they do forensic testing, and on the defendant's jeans, they find Scott Hutchins' blood and DNA. Also, they find a lunchbox that's the defendant's, and you'll find out why it's identified as the defendant's lunchbox, but inside that lunchbox is a box of ammunition. This is .22 caliber ammunition. And they count it, and there are 44 of 50. There are 6 live rounds that are missing. This will become important a little bit later. You're also going to hear about that search, another search warrant that was taking place contemporaneously with the Weld County 45 property, because Heather Frank's apartment is being searched as well. Again, by Laramie County Sheriff's Office with 3D Police Department aiding them. And you're going to hear that the blood evidence in this case for Scott Sessions' murder is found here at this location, that it is voluminous. It is so voluminous that it seeps through the rug all the way to the subfloor. You're going to hear from a forensic pathologist who did the autopsy on Scott Sessions, and you're going to hear that the pathologist will tell you that there is a very horrific, terrible, violent, sharp object knife wound. And that wound goes across his throat and angles downward. And it was done with such force that it goes all the way to the spinal column, and it severs the vertebral artery. That's that blood evidence that we were talking about in the entryway. But you're also going to hear from Dr. Wilkerson that Scott Sessions tried to defend himself. He wasn't a small man, he's about 6 foot. You can see the defensive wounds on his hands. While these searches are going on, you're going to hear that the defendant was searched after he was arrested and taken to the Laramie County Sheriff's Department, where they were going to interview him. And you're going to hear when he searched, they find in his pocket 5 .22 caliber bullets, 3 live rounds, 2 spent shell casings. And they also find a very gnarly fixed blade knife. Back at the Bunnell property, former Deputy Ray Johnson, with Weld County Sheriff's Department, was taking a break, and he looks over at this burn pit area. And when he looks over, he sees this picnic table. Now, most of this wood is weathered. This picnic table looking thing is weathered as well. He thought it was a little bit strange. So he goes over and he makes a very gruesome discovery. Because what he finds when he lifts it up is the dead body of a female wrapped in plastic and baling wire. Right around the corner from where all that stuff was being burned at. What investigators won't know until February 18th is that this is the body of Heather Frank, and that she was shot twice in the chest, close range, with a small caliber. Remember? 2 shell casings found in the defendant's pocket, 22. You're going to hear that these 3 things are happening at once. We have Heather Frank's apartment being searched. We have that Weld County Road property being searched. And then we have the defendant's interview. And you can hear that it's a lengthy interview. He does that interview with investigators Ryan Maya and Justin Allen. And you're going to be able to hear what he says. be able to hear his cagey, crafty answers to questions. Admit what you can't deny and deny what you can't admit. But you're going to be able to see the defendant and observe for yourself. Because the man sitting here, he doesn't look like he did back on February 16th of 2020. And you're going to hear his version of events, which will paint him as innocent, even though he says he's not. You're going to hear a lot of witnesses over the course of this particular case. You're going to hear witnesses that are experts, DNA experts, trace evidence experts. You're going to hear experts in cellular, the digital cell phone analysis, digital analysis of, electronic devices. You're going to hear a blind expert talk about victim dynamics of victims who have experienced domestic violence. You're going to hear lay witnesses, just normal people like you and me, who witnessed some piece of this crime. And you're going to hear from a number of dedicated law enforcement officers who investigated these two horrific murders. You're also going to hear, again, from Dr. Wilkerson, the forensic pathologist that we just spoke about. And he's going to tell you that on February 18th, he does an autopsy of Heather Frank. And Heather Frank's injuries, as I stated before, are 2 gunshot wounds to the chest. He's going to tell you that he saw soot on her sweater and that there were contact burns on her chest. He's going to tell you that they were very close together, that the directionality of these bullets were directionally close to each other. But you're also going to hear about the fact that he finds one projectile, is what they call it, but one projectile inside Heather Frank, and it's actually all the way to her back. And you're going to hear him talk to you about these specific bullet wounds. He's going to call them short bullet wounds. He's going to tell you why that's important. And he's also going to tell you about other factors that he takes into consideration when he is assessing the manner of death, not just the cause of death, but also the manner of death. He's going to tell you that this projectile that was in her back is consistent with a small caliber. And ladies and gentlemen, those bullet wounds were on her left side in her chest. He's going to tell you about how that causes death. But there can be no mistaking here the message sent by the defendant directly to Heather Frank's heart. In the end of this case, we've heard all of the testimony and we have given you all of the evidence. You will find that all of the credible evidence that I said in my opening points back to the defendant. Because he could not let Heather Frank slip from his deadly grasp. When we've proven our case, we'll come back here into this courtroom and we'll stand in this bail for the court and we'll ask you to find him guilty on all matters.